Okay, so before we get into production, let's spend a brief moment just to review all of the different ways that we have of syncing develop settings from one image to the next, because each one is going to actually be very useful in different situations. Okay, so let's cover the standard syncing function first, and this is probably the one that everybody's most familiar with. It's just basically where we select a group or a range of photos, and the first photo selected in that group is basically the master photo. These other ones are going to have the settings synced from this one that's selected. The way it works is we hit Control-Shift-S, Command-Shift-S on a Mac, or you can also go down here and just click the Sync button. Okay, now this brings up the Synchronize Settings option box where we can choose basically from the dialog which particular options that we want to have synced from one image to the next. Okay, so we're going to be using this quite often when we want to sync settings across, say, an entire batch of photos that are basically shot in the same scene with the same settings and everything like that. All right, so let's cancel out of this. Now let's go over the previous button. So I'm going to select one image here, and when we dial in settings, we can go to the next image, and then we can just hit the previous button, which is this button right here. You can also get there by hitting Control-Alt-V or Command-Option-V on a Mac. And what this is going to do is just basically sync over settings from the last image to the image that you're on currently. So if I dial the exposure down to -3 in this, which I wouldn't obviously do in a real example, and then I go to my next image, I can hit Control-Alt-V, and it's going to dial in those exact settings from the prior image. Now this is extremely useful when, say, we don't need to make adjustments over a large group of images, but maybe just a few images in a row that have similar features. So we can just go from one to the next. We don't have to actually pull up the sync dialog, we just sync from the last photo. The only downside to this is that if you want to, say, sync this photo with this image's settings, then you actually have to click back on this photo, then click back to this photo again so that that photo was the previous photo that you viewed. So it works off of the previous photo that was viewed and not just the last photo in the grouping right here. Alright, the next sync function I want to review is the Match Total Exposures function. And this is really nice because let's say in one scene, and let's pick this for example, let's say we want to sync all of our settings over from this scene, and we're going to make an adjustment real quick. So I'll do the standard soft color or standard color soft portrait adjustment, and then what I want to do is basically sync this across these images. So I'm going to take those and I'm going to sync it up by hitting Control-Shift-S. We're going to select everything and just because it won't really matter, we're just doing it for the purpose of this tutorial. So it's going to sync all the settings over, but we notice that exposures are going to vary a slight bit just because we were actually changing exposures in camera. And if you're shooting like on a different priority mode, like say aperture priority or shutter priority, these exposures are going to be even more inconsistent. We're shooting manual, we're just making adjustments as we go. So notice that this first image is actually a little bit darker than this second image. Okay, so what we can do here is we can use the Match Total Exposures to select, say, the correct image. So let's say this is the correct exposure on this image. We select a grouping of images, and then we hit Control-Alt-Shift-M or Command-Option-Shift-M on a Mac. And this is going to basically take the exposures from each one of these shots and match it to that master photo that we selected first. So it's not changing anything else. We can see all of our other settings are standard. They're not changed. But only the exposure is the one that's changed if and when the overall exposure for that image is off. Now, in situations where this is nice is basically like this, where we want to match this scene across the board and the background and the composition and everything basically stays the same from image to image. As soon as the background and composition changes, then the Match Total Exposure function isn't going to work very well because it's basically basing this entire thing off of an overall image. And if your background is changing, if the foreground is changing, the colors are going to be different, the luminosity levels are going to be different, and you're not going to get consistent results. So this setting works extremely well in, say, a studio where every shot is identical with the exception of the expression, or say in a scene like this where we're basically not changing our composition, we're just shooting different expressions, different poses, and most everything in the scene is just staying the same. Alright, so now let's go over the auto sync function. And basically what the auto sync function is going to do is it's going to take any changes that are made to the photos and apply it across whatever photos are selected. So let's say we select this grouping of images. Okay, we're going to select these, and all we do to turn it on is we turn on this little switch right here, which is going to turn on auto sync. Now once auto sync is enabled, any changes that are made, whether it is a dialing of the slider or whatever we do, you can see are going to be reflected across every one of the images that we have selected. We can also do the same thing by applying, say, a preset. So if we make all these black and white, it's going to switch every one of these to black and white. Same thing, it's going to automatically sync them with our preset across our selection. Now, we don't generally use this feature just to batch process, like to select a grouping and then make adjustments to them, because each individual photo is going to need a little bit of tweaking on its own. But we do use this feature when we want to apply, say, a specific preset across a large group of images without having to do any other syncing and stuff. It's really easy to turn on the auto sync, select the grouping of images, and apply a preset or do whatever you need to for that group of images. All right, so with auto sync turned on, what we're going to do now is go back to our standard import, which is going to bring all these back to the standard import preset. Okay, now the last syncing function I want to go over is the copy paste function. Okay, so what the copy paste is going to do is basically going to allow us to copy develop settings from one image and then paste it wherever we want. So this is nice because we talked about how if you use the previous button, basically if you want to copy settings from this image to this one, you got to click on that one, then you got to click back to this one, which if both of them appear next to each other on the film strip or in the same kind of area on the film strip, that's not a hassle. But if you're scrolling from the film strip and you're saying, I want to copy settings from this image all the way back to, oh crap, I got to find that one image again. That's kind of a hassle. So what we do is we use the copy setting or copy develop settings. So I'm going to select an image, and just so that we can change it and make it look different, we're going to select the standard black and white portrait setting. We're going to dial in a little bit more exposure on this. So there it is, done. And what we're going to do is hit Control-Shift-C or Command-Shift-C to copy these develop settings to the Lightroom clipboard. Now we're going to select which ones we want to copy. We'll just select checked all just to make it easy, and we're going to hit copy now. Now we can go to whatever image we want. It doesn't matter where it is or how many times we do it. We just go over an image, we hit Control-Shift-V or Command-Shift-V on a Mac, and then it'll apply those develop settings that have been pasted or saved to the clipboard, and it's going to paste over that image. So it's nice because you can do that as many times as you want over different images. So once you have basically copied these to the clipboard, they'll stay there until you essentially either exit Lightroom or you copy another set of image settings to the clipboard. Okay, so it's another really nice, useful syncing feature. All right, everybody, so we're done with all the chat. Let's get on to actually doing our basic processing with the next video.